Last time on A Soldier's Life. Eric learns a new spell form, Air Shield. Constantine and Eric goes herb hunting, fuck English, in the woods, and Eric shows his new spell to Constantine, who makes him practice it in combat. Eric sells the herbs they found to two elderly and flirty sisters. Someone who is also very flirty is Eric's servant, Lorene, who he tries his best to avoid. Someone who doesn't avoid her servant is Castile, who Eric more or less walks in on. Poor Eric, who just wants to be a good boy. Eric is sent out into the woods by himself, and there he finds a Goliath who wants to go back with him and renew his hunting contract. It goes well, but Eric has to go with him back into the woods and meet the other wardens. Chapter 86. The Wardens. As we walked, Mavieth asked, "Are you any good with your pokers, Legionnaire?" "Oh, they're gonna play poker?" The Goliath pointed at my spear and I was actually excited that they were gonna gamble in poker, but he meant the pokers as the ones who does the poking. The weapons. I Too excited, too fast. The Goliath pointed at my spear and sword, while a club the size of my leg swung on his hip. Dried blood was evident on it. I downplayed my skill. Decent enough. I have only been learning for the last 6 months. "Well, do not worry. I will protect you out here. You can be my junior. That is like a kid brother among my people. We protect those of our people who cannot protect themselves," he replied with sincerity or maybe humor. It was hard to tell because of his deep voice. I nodded, not taking the bait to argue with him. I queried his skills. "Are you familiar with the local flora and fungi?" The large man's deep voice said, "Just the edible ones, and some of the ones that prevent infection." We spent the next hour talking about and pointing out the different flora and fungi, making slow progress toward his home. I learned a little about the local edibles, and he learned about some of the more valuable ones he could sell in the city. That was something new for Mavieth. He was going to be allowed to enter the city and freely trade with the people. It was not so much a concession, but a request by Castile and the Duchess. The Duchess wanted it known that the Goliath was under her rule. I assumed it was for the intimidation factor. We finally reached the Goliath's home. A small clearing held a herb garden, and tanning hides of 2 elk and a deer were stretched on a rack. A small shack made of stone was in the back, and he pointed to it. "That is my smoker shack for preserving meat. I just finished a batch of elk meat." He pointed at his unique cabin. "That is home." It looked like he had built a 10-foot wide cabin between 2 massive boulders. It was not very tall either. The wood shingle roof only coming up to my shin and extending back about 15 feet. The entire structure was just 10 by 15. Maybe it was waiting for my reaction, so I gave him one. "Impressive." He started laughing in deep, belching chuckles. He walked to the doorway and opened it. It showed stairs going down into a large, well-lit room. I followed him down. A dozen fist-sized glowstones were embedded in the stone walls, but the walls were further back than expected. The room was too large. He waited again for my reaction. "Did you carve your cabin into the boulders?" I asked, figuring out the size was maybe 30 by 30 feet. "With my own 2 hands over the course of 2 years. Besides, the other wardens, you are only the 3rd person I've invited in, Legionnaire," he said congenially. "Thank you for your hospitality and honor, Goliath." I took in the large room. Half the room had stone tables and chairs, which appeared to be his work area. The other half was his kitchen and larder with drying herbs and meats. 2 archways in the back were dark, and I assumed they went to other rooms. The dwelling was dry and smelled earthy. Mavieth went to the kitchen area to unload his burden. "I will prepare the meal. Those buckets over there need to be filled by the stream we passed coming in. Filling the tub over the stove should also take you 3 trips. I thought it was an invitation to do his chores for him, but I did not protest. Each bucket was maybe 6 gallons, and there was even a yoke to carry them on my shoulders. I made the first trip to the wide stream, which had a number of small fish visible from the shore. When I returned, Maybe was cooking wild onions and potatoes with one of the large slabs of bacon he had taken. "Are you going to cook that entire slab tonight?" I asked, curious as it was easily 20 pounds. "Dinner and breakfast, yes. Giant boar is hard to find locally, and this belly meat will be a treat." He was focused on the meal preparation. I finished filling his basin by the stove, which he used firewood to heat. A draft hole in the stone took the steam and cooking smoke away from the room, but soon the room heated up, and I was sweating. He cut the bacon into square chunks, seared them, stored the fat in a container, and then added the crispy chunks to a thick onion and potato soup. He presented me with a bowl of the meat. The bowl was as large as my head, and we sat at one of the stone tables. Maybe it hunched over his stone bowl while he shoveled the meal into his mouth, moaning in delight with each spoonful. I tried the soup, but he had been a little too generous with the ground peppercorns he had just acquired. The bacon chunks were still crunchy. The bowl I was eating from was polished stone, as was the spoon. I looked around the room. Everything was made from stone, except a small part of the ceiling and the wall with the door entry. The walls were smooth, not rough like they had been mined. Maybe it finished his bowl and let out a long, contented belch. He went and retrieved a second bowl and sat down eating more slowly this time. Curious, I asked, "Can you shape stone?" I held up my spoon as evidence. He nodded and finished swallowing. "I can, just with my hands and not for long. I do not have very much ether." He pointed at the glowstones in the ceiling. "I made those from a single glowstone. I only need to charge them once a week." Ooh. Everything I saw now made some sense. He had literally carved his home out of the rocks with his bare hands. I finished my bowl, swallowing the peppery soup, and he finished his second. I asked, "So, where am I going to sleep?" "You are going to share my bed, Lieutenant." He said it so confidently that I thought he was serious. He broke into bellowing laughter a moment later. I was sure I had made a face of unease. "Come, I will show you the guest room." I thought he was serious. He's like, "We have more than enough space in my bed." I followed him into the passage on the right, and he took one of the glowstones from the ceiling as he passed. The short corridor ended in a rectangular room lined with shelves. Most contained rolled-up leather hides, but several sealed stone jars were marked in strange letters. There was an alcove about 2 feet off the floor with 2 large weasel hides. I do not have many guests, but you should be comfortable. My sleeping room is adjacent, and if you get scared, Legionnaire, you can crawl in with me. He does get scared and wakes up and wants to talk with his problem about talk about his problems with his parents and eat the bacon and omelets for breakfast. He chuckled, thinking he was being funny. Rest, as I still have a number of things to finish this evening. What do you mean think he was being funny? He is being funny. And pet dog, yes, and pet dog. Oscar, very important. I waved my hand to dismiss him, and he walked out. I stripped off my Legion armor, but kept my helmet closed reflexively. There was no door to my room for privacy, but that did not matter. The pelt of the weasel was incredibly soft. It had a silky smoothness, and I glided easily on them as I slid between them. I could not believe I was here tonight, instead of at the Citadel in my room being attended to by Larine, after I've been told that I can indeed fuck her. Did anyone even tell her where I had gone? I took out my Griffin down pillow and got comfortable. I took out the Time Affinity book and carefully reviewed each page. Then I took my amulet and went into the dreamscape. I recreated the book while Oscar was begging for attention. It looked correct. Now I could return the book to the Duchess' library and still be able to study the spell form once I decided on one. I filled the shelf in the entry room with all the books I owned, since I had paged through them all at one point in time, and I tried to add a book from Earth as an experiment. I laughed as The Hobbit was added to my collection. I took the book and paged through it. Even though I had read the book twice in my life, I doubted I remembered everything I had read, but it looked complete and even had the same paper smell and feel I remembered. I put it on the shelf with the others. I decided I needed some practice fighting monsters. I spent some time fighting the Ankh eggs with my new air shield spell form. The acid spray they had could be diverted with 2 stacked shields. I just needed to be careful not to step in the puddles until after the acid lost its potency. I froze the entire room whenever I was about to take an injury. I was still uncertain how death worked in the amulet. Maybe the Duchess library had a reference book for the dungeon artifact. I lost 3 times and reset the entire encounter each time, starting from the beginning. My biggest asset was the air shield. I could cast it and prevent the giant bug from turning, giving me time to damage its flanks. Oscar watched me try different tactics, patiently wagging his cropped tail, waiting for his turn to play with me. The 4th encounter was my first serious injury. My leg had been crushed before I paused time, but it did not hurt until I willed it to. The pain was intense, but with just a thought, my leg was healed, and the pain was gone. I controlled everything in the dreamscape. I played a few minutes with Oscar before leaving and told him I would be back. I had been inside for maybe 4 hours. On leaving, the intense headache hit me, and I moaned into the fur. I did not understand. The last time I used Amulet to learn the air shield spell form, I did not feel anything when I left the dreamscape. What was different? I was gonna say that as well. Why did he will the leg pain? He was like, until I told it to. Until I told myself to feel pain. I guess he wanted to try, which I understand, that he wants to like, okay, but how does this work type of thing. But now he knows, so now he doesn't have to do it again. I had created items that were not part of the dreamscape. All the new books. Maybe the amulet pulled the knowledge from my head, and that caused this pressing migraine. It was just an observation, and I would experiment to confirm it. Would I get the same migraine if I only fought and reset the monsters? What about the Constantine construct I created and dismissed? Would he still cause mental fatigue if I summoned him again? Or would the amulet remember him? The weasel pelt had made me sweat, so I removed a canteen of water and drank it. I could hear Maviet snoring loudly in the other room. It was muted by the stone, but still annoying. My headache made sleeping hard, so I took an oblivion pill and drifted off. Wake up, Legionnaire. We have a long day ahead, Maviet said in a deep voice, breaking a rather nice, dreamless sleep. My head was still splitting from the amulet. Damn, Goliath. You and Constantine would get along splendidly, I moaned, getting up. I look forward to meeting him, he said cheerfully. Leave your armor, as it will make too much noise, and we have a good distance to travel. Also, Trek is not fond of legionnaires. Best not to advise what you are. He sounded too chipper this morning, and I was glad to notice at least my headache from the amulet had faded on standing. I already ate, so get what you want, and we can head to Trek's treehouse. Treehouse! He had left me some of the soup, and it was already heated. The bacon was no longer crunchy, but it was still good. I felt naked without my hardened leather armor and steel helm. We left at a fast walk, and Maviet stated, "It is about 12 miles north. We will pass close to one of the weasel dens, so making as little noise as possible is best." I followed Maviet, and he moved extremely quietly for such an enormous being. "How are you so quiet?" I asked after an hour. Just want to go back to that he said, don't tell him that you're a legionnaire. I'm like, but Eric is here on legionnaire business. Like, what are their story gonna be? Like, what is he? I guess you could say that he's a guard of the city, that he was like, hi, Veronica is cool with you guys, I guess. Or like, what is he gonna say? Habit mostly. It is hard to sneak up on an elk when you're stomping the ground. I'm not sure if I can explain it, Legionnaire, but I will try, he said with seriousness. For the next few hours, I walked in front, and he taught me his self-learned skills of moving silently. It had to do with body movement. Really, really, did it? Crazy. Where you were stepping, how you were stepping, and getting a feel for applying your weight as you stepped. When I made a noticeable noise, he had me pause and figure out what I did wrong. Dude, this is just big Constantine. It was more of a learn by mistake education, as a lot of Maviet's movements were more instinctive than learned. He had to think about it just as much as I did. When we arrived at Trek's treehouse, it was perched high in a wide oak tree. The structure was made from logs, and hauling them up there must have been an impressive feat. I spotted pulleys dangling from the thicker branches, which did not make the accomplishment any less impressive. Maviet looked around from a distance before announcing loudly, "I do not think he is home." He walked into the clearing under the tree and looked around. He shook his head. I was hoping to catch him before he left to hunt today. It appeared to be a poor act on Maviet's part, announcing his arrival. Okay. "Where are you now?" A voice came from far to our right. A thin, blond man with an impressive beard entered the clearing to join us. He had 2 hand axes on his belt. His clothing, like Maviet's, was all medium brown colored hides. "You coming to see if I'm still alive, Maviet?" "No. A job offer from the new Duchess," Maviet said, and Trek immediately went sour. "Do not worry. You can remain in your treehouse. She's not going to force you into the city. She's marking her lands, and you need to keep on the lookout for predators when her men are laying the markers in this area. This is my new kid brother, and he represents the Duchess." Kid brother? What? Did you shit him out? I doubt any woman would lay with you. What? Wait, how would that make him brother? He said in a jest as he looked me up and down with some curiosity. I grimaced as being the butt of their jokes, but endured it. "There is even 3 silver a week pay for your efforts," I added, trying to finish the introduction. "I am Eric." I held out my hand, but he ignored it. He swayed his head in consideration of the offer. Maviet added, "I will spend it for you in the city and bring you what you want." Maviet turned and addressed me. "Trek does not like being around a lot of people. I am surprised he did not run for the hills with the 2 of us here." Trek spat and grinned. "I would have, but I count you more animal than man, Maviet, so I just counted your new boy here. I can handle talking to 1 person." It was obvious the 2 had a good relationship. They just liked trading verbal jabs. So they're best friends. "So it is a deal? I will collect your writ from the Duchess and bring it to you with your first 10 weeks' wages. If you want anything, I can bring it back from the city for you," Maviet said patiently. Trek seemed undecided before nodding. He just walked away and didn't say anything else. "Not a social butterfly, is he?" I said softly. Maviet looked at me and tried to puzzle out my words. "No, he flies on his own wings. He probably just spoke more words in the last few minutes than in the last 6 months. Our next stop is Leonis. He will not be so easy to convince." We continued through the northern woods, moving northwest. It was late afternoon when we reached our destination. Maviet was impressed that I had been able to keep up with him and still practice my silent movement. Without my armor, it felt like I had limitless endurance. Leonis's cabin was more conventional, a small log cabin nestled in the woods. As we approached, a short man exited the cabin. He had 1 arm in a sling, reddish-brown hair, and a massive beard that appeared to be a requirement to be a warden. Maybe its hairless face being the exception. So not a requirement. Maybe it called from a distance. "Leonis, can we approach?" The man located us and waved us to him. As we got closer, it was not just his arm, but also his head that had a wound of dry blood. "What chewed you up?" The man was pale under the filth covering him, and had probably lost a fair amount of blood. He looked relieved to see Maviet, and had not even given me a second glance. He must have had a concussion, because his eyes were unfocused. Maviet asked again, "What creature did you fight? Did you win, or is it still out there?" He put effort into focusing on Maviet. "Clinton called me to help with a beast problem. A few days back, the heavy rains to the north have forced a few toward us. He didn't know what it was, but we tracked it some 30 miles from here. It was a manticore. It surprised us and got Clinton. I barely escaped. That was 2 days ago, I think. Maybe it was on alert. It might have tracked you after it consumed Clinton. You should have called Trek and me to help. This is why only 4 of us are left. Now 3, he said seriously. Also, okay, so he actually died. Clinton died. Rip Clinton. 1 warden down, I guess. Let us get inside and lock the door and deal with your wounds for now. Mavieth and I scanned the surrounding woods as we made our way into Leonis's cabin. I seemed to have terrible luck. My armor was at Mavieth's house, and I was possibly facing another dangerous creature from this world. Yeah. Chapter 87. Manticores. We entered Leonis' small cabin. It was not as orderly or as well constructed as Mavieth's. It also had a strong smell of ammonia, like dried urine. Nice. He had a single table and smell. It was just because I was thinking of the urine smell. He had a single table and a small bed in his cabin as his only furnishings. Maybe it sighed deeply at the mess and smell. Tell me what happened from the beginning. Leonis sat on his bed, cradling his arm. Clinton said he found several mauled deer with their guts eaten. He thought a direwolf had moved south after that torrential rain. We tracked the creature to the rocky hills. It was sunning itself on a rock, and we were not sure what it was. We didn't see the second one coming from above. Clinton took a tail whip to the chest, and the barbs pierced his heart. He died quickly. Leonis was shaking slightly at the memory. He compartmentalized the trauma and continued. I got my spear into its hindquarters and ran into the trees. The beast and I fought among the trees. I was only saved as the one that had been resting started to eat Clinton. The one I was fighting was larger and returned to claim its kill, I think. I ran as fast as I could here. It was quiet for a time. Manticores are all over Stone Mountain Island, where I am from, Mavieth said heavily. They are rare in this part of the world. I know some things about their nature. Leonis nodded. The only time I had seen one before this was at the New Year's Games in the capital when I was a child. It took 7 men in the arena to take it down, and not all of them lived. I looked back and forth between the 2 wardens. I have never seen one. I am here. What do they look like? The gray-skinned man sighed. Manticores are as malicious as they are ugly. Their body is as large as a horse, but akin to a lion. He looked at Leonis. That is why you confuse the prince, Leonis. A wolf's and a lion's prince are very similar. The Goliath folded his legs under him and sat so he would no longer have to duck the low ceiling. A manticore's head is a grotesque thing, though. It looks like an ogre's head with a wide maw full of sharp triangular teeth, made for cutting flesh and covered in a mane of foul-smelling hair. They can also attack with their claws and a barbed tail. They fly as well, with thin leathery wings, made more for gliding than flying. If they are mature enough, those tail spikes can be flung like arrows and contain a corrosive poison. Small amounts of the poison are not fatal, but destroy your muscles, weakening you and creating excruciating pain. Have you ever hunted manticores? I asked Mavieth. No, he grunted. Climbing the mountain to find a lair was for warriors only. Lair? It says liar, no? I was too young to hunt one before I left my people. Some sadness crept into his voice. On the right side, he sheared up a little and talked about harvesting a manticore. The tail barbs of a full-grown adult make excellent arrows. Their hide can make excellent armor, and the wings make prized cloaks and pouches. Mavieth shifted on the floor and removed a pouch from his belt, and he had a familiar vial of myconid powder. I think we will head to Trek's house tomorrow, and then we will all go to the city and seek the aid of your mage commander. Leonis immediately perked up, agitated. Yeah, because he just revealed that Eric is a legionnaire. You want to bring a useless legion company out here. He was angry, but in his depleted state lacked any real energy to show it. Cool yourself, Leonis. We cannot handle a pair of manticores ourselves. The new Duchess is prepared to give you a free wit to live here. Maviot growled at the man, and Leonis relaxed some. Maviot looked at me with seriousness. Leonis does not like the Legion mages. They were responsible for the deaths of his family. Cursed Legion mages were more concerned about protecting the imperial buildings than saving the lowly citizens of my town. My family was burned alive by the flames of a rogue fire drake training to be part of the Dragon Legion. His veins were bulging, and his anger had risen again at the telling. Even I knew there were no right words to say. Maviot called him. Leonis, relax. His mage commander was not one of them. I already asked. It appeared Maviot had already tested the waters in preparation for recruiting the other wardens into the Duchess's service. We will sleep tonight and make our way tomorrow. I will spread the powder and return shortly. Which direction did you come from? Leonis pointed in a direction, and Maviot nodded. Maviot left the cabin, and I was alone with Leonis. I am sorry for the loss of your friend, I finally said. He grunted and tried to study me, but his eyes wouldn't focus. He must have a concussion. I thought about offering him one of my lesser healing potions, but hesitated. The man finally said, Clinton wasn't the best man, but he didn't deserve to die like that. The nasty weather was stirred all kinds of ill tidings. Probably some mage was playing with power beyond his control. It was the Barbaradian mages. They were angry at losing Matcha to the Duke's army, I informed him. I decided not to tell him that the Italian mages had torn down the city and likely killed dozens, if not hundreds, of civilians. The torrential rains were not the only incident. Numerous extreme weather incidents erupted across the empire. They say a lot of the crops will be lost this year. And the people will suffer. Not the first citizens or the nobles. Just the people that keep this empire afloat. His anger had risen and his pale face was turning red again. I completely agree, I replied, trying to calm him down. It seemed to work as the warden eventually lay prone on his bed and fell asleep. His anger had consumed his remaining energy. Maviot returned an hour after leaving and did not look happy. Leonis was asleep, so he spoke to me softly. I caught sight of one of the beasts, maybe 4 miles north of here in the twilight sky. It was circling, and I assumed its partner had taken down prey. It was probably waiting its turn to feed. What does it mean? Are they tracking Leonis here? I stirred uneasily. Yes, but they are not the best trackers. They mostly spot their prey from the air and swoop down on it. They will fire a barrage of barbs and then barrel into their prey. My guess is that since they wounded Leonis, they think he will be an easy kill. They are not the smartest of creatures. Maybe it seemed uncomfortable at the prospect of fighting the creatures. Should we leave tonight then, before they find us? I asked, ready to grab my pack and leave. No, clouds are moving in. It would be too dark to make our way without a glowstone, and a glowstone would be a beacon to them. Hopefully, the myconid powder I spread will prevent them from locating us. He did not sound too optimistic. We were only 20 miles from Sobral, but I could not think of a way to safely reach it. The weasels were also going to be out, so it made sense to remain where we were. Get some rest and I will keep watch. He moved to one of the windows with a chair. When he sat, the chair strongly protested his weight. I would have liked to use my amulet, but if someone did come tonight, then I wanted to be able to respond. I removed a large hot meat pie from Matcha. At this point, there was no point in hiding my space from Maviot. Maybe Castile had already told him anyway. His surprised look said he was unaware though. The scent in the room was such that Leonis drooled in his sleep, and Maviot kept giving me side glances. I ate half of it before giving it to a confused Maviot. Oh, I explained. I have a spell form for our dimensional space. It is the size of the herb crate I had when you found me. His eyes narrowed some. And you made me carry the crate all the way back to the city for you, Legionnaire. I shrugged. You looked capable enough, Goliath. I returned with a smile. He grunted, but hid a small grin at being duped. At least now he had a chance to enjoy a good meal. He quickly finished the meat pie. That was amazing. Do you have any wine to wash it down? He had a joking tone, not thinking I did, but he does. I had the bottle of wine from my interview with the Chancellor. I produced it and his eyes went wide. He quickly dumped the water from his canteen and emptied half the bottle into it. Returning the half-full bottle to me, he sipped on the wine and smiled. It is excellent. I drank from the bottle, still not appreciating the wine. After Maybe had finished his wine, he softened a little. He admitted. We will have to fight them tomorrow. Come to the window and listen. I did as he instructed. I don't hear anything, I said, after straining for minutes to hear. Exactly. The insects, night birds, and creatures know a true predator is in the area. If it were just the weasels, the insects and night birds would be active. No, the manticores are close. I do not think they will assault the cabin. They prefer to attack from range with quills before moving in for the kill. Maybe it looked at the other warden. Leonis was drooling but sleeping soundly. I handed Maybe a lesser healing potion. He turned it in his hands, reading it. For him? I nodded. It will cure his head wound and bring his senses back, but not heal his broken arm. Are you sure? If you are right, we need everyone as capable as possible, I confirmed. He moved, woke him, and administered the potion. Leonis fell asleep again. Thank you, Eric. I do not have many friends, but I count Leonis among them. He faced me. Tomorrow, at first light, I will rush into the woods to draw them out. I will circle back to the cabin and maybe we can fight one of them together. Leonis should be able to swing a blade. If we can disable the larger one, we may scare that smaller one into fleeing. I did not find sleep as I waited for dawn with Mavia. We woke Leonis and he went into his root cellar to feed us. He looked much healthier and was talking clearly. I should be the one to run out there, Mavia, and circle around to draw them out. I can't use a bow like this, but you can. You're too weak. The healing potion drained your already frail body. He let out a soft chuckle to indicate he was teasing the man. It was not long before Maviath opened the door. The fresh air outside rushed in with the morning light. We do not see anything suspicious. He pointed. I will enter the woods there and circle around and come back from the right. I will take a position there behind the rock and use my bow. When it comes into range with me, rush out and attack it. He sounded more confident than I think he was. I'm so not looking forward to this. This is Of course, Eric has his dimensional space, but fuck. He took a deep breath and sprinted across the small clearing into the trees, and I could see his large body moving among the thick trunks. A commotion in the woods came from the left as he moved right. A large creature pursued him, but it only looked like one. Where was the second creature? Maybe it ran his circle, came out from the right as planned, and slid on the wet grass to take shelter under a tree and behind a rock, pulling his bow. The creature that followed him out was as grotesque looking as he had described. The mashed, semi-human looking face was covered in a tangled mane of dark brown, shaggy hair. Dried bits of flesh and blood hung from the mane. The first arrow Maviath fired landed solidly in the shoulder, and the creature wailed. In response to the wail, screams of anger came from over the cabin. Maviath turned and looked. Even at almost 30 yards away, I could see the color drain from his angry-skinned face. 2 more above the cabin. 2? He fired an arrow above us, and a wail erupted, and then a storm of quills landed around Maviath. 3 ended in his upper torso and 1 in his calf. Oh, and they were poison. He immediately began pulling them out. The 2 new manticores landed between us and Maviath, their backs to us. They were much larger than the one that had chased Maviath through the woods. From behind, I could tell one was clearly male, and one was female. So important. Maviath was in big trouble. The smaller one struggled to move with the arrow in its shoulder, but its 2 parents were unhappy. Come on, Legionnaire. They're not going to kill themselves. Leonis moved, and I moved with him. The female turned her head, and I really wished I had my armor on as she raised her tail and whipped it at us, releasing a half-dozen 2-foot-long barbs. I placed an air shield, and all the barbs were halted in the air disc. The female turned to face us, and I noticed it was not as messy an eater as its child. Its mane was clear of debris. Leonis had stumbled with 2 quills in his body. He was incapacitated with pain. Well, that's Leonis, I guess. That was worth healing him for. I had no choice but to take one creature down immediately. I pulled a pylon spear into my hands and pocketed a lesser healing potion before using my dimensional ability. Oh! The female looked too confident as I approached. That was until a good portion of her chest was moved into my dimensional space. The creature strongly resisted my removal of her organs, and I knew she had much stronger ether resistance than a human. I was still able to overcome her ether resistance. Her expression became shocked as she stumbled, then collapsed. The familiar bottoming out of my ether happened, but I barely stumbled, expecting the dizziness. I was already rushing to take on the male from behind. Also, fucking Eric is already out as well, basically. The pylum is an interesting spear. The tip is basically a 2-foot metal rod made for piercing shields. I threw the pylum from 15 feet away with it all my strength. Even I could not miss this close, and I did not want to get any closer with the threatening tail barbs. My aim was a little off. Not even I can miss at this. I was a little off, but it had the effect I wanted. The creature reared and howled as the pylum entered 3 feet into it from behind. It spun and bit the wooden shaft, shattering it, but not removing the true cause of its pain lodged deep. I moved left to see Mavius struggling with his bow, but he fired another arrow and hit the male in the chest, joining his first arrow. I was unfazed and focused on something else. The male was trying to reach the remainder of the spear, spinning in place like a dog chasing its tail. It would have been comical, except we were still in extreme danger. Leonis was on the ground, in pain from the manticore poison, and not going to contribute. My only remaining weapon now was my short sword. I circled to join Maviet, who was leaning on the rock for support and trying to get another arrow strung. I reached Maviet and handed him the potion with the stopper off. While he drank, I watched the angry male give up and turn his focus on me. The female was dead, and their child had Maviet's arrow lodged deep into its shoulder and was crying for its parents, having difficulty walking. Maviet rasped, "Give me a moment, and I should be able to draw my bow again." The manticore then did the unexpected. It spoke. Oh, what? Like human language? Huh? I am officially shocked. I did not expect it to speak. What did it say then? Oh my god, please. Chapter 88. Battered and Bruised. The manticore's voice was guttural, as I would expect from its flat, ogre-shaped face. He was not talking to me, but to Mavieth, in a language I could not understand. There were a few harsh phrases before Mavieth responded in the same language. What the fuck? If Mavieth knew this the whole time, that we can't speak to it. The two exchanged words, and my grip got sweaty on my hilt. The smaller manticore was lying down in mystery, and I think Mavieth's first arrow did more damage than I thought. His arrows were as thick as my thumb and longer than my arm. It must have penetrated the chest cavity, and the arrowhead had done serious damage. On the other hand, the arrow he had shot into the adult male had barely penetrated 6 inches and had already been ripped out by its maw, leaving a bleeding hole that had already coagulated. My pilum had entered through a much softer part of the hide. Standing next to the Goliath, I asked, "What are you two so chatty about?" What the fuck? He's so calm. Maybe it said another phrase in the harsh language and then addressed me. It speaks the language of the stone giants. Not very well, but it has some grasp of the speech. That's crazy. They were a mated pair from Stone Mountain Island. A number of their kind were summoned by a mage and released north of here to cause havoc. Oh. It recognizes my race and is trying to bargain for its life, knowing we honor our word. It is offering its treasure if you heal it and its child. Ooh! Leonis was moaning near the cabin door, trying to pull himself inside and unable to fight. A manticore quill was in his shoulder and another one in his hip. The manticore angular teeth in impatience and discomfort. I could tell movement was difficult for it, with the long pylon piercing it. Maybe it couldn't fly. Its body would undulate in flight, and, like its suffering offspring, the long rod of the pylon was just too painful. The beast looked at its mate and spoke again. When it finished, Maeve asked. It thinks you poisoned its mate and is worried you poisoned it as well. I exhaled. Yeah, let us go with that. Yeah, right. That sounds great. Yes, that's what happened. Maybe it looked at me sidelong, not taking its eyes off the creature 20 feet away. Maybe it spoke quietly. How did you kill the female? I gave her indigestion, I quipped. What? This is not the time. The female was on her side, leaking a steady flow of blood from her mouth. Are you going to be able to kill the male? I am all out of aces. There was silence, and I figured maybe it was trying to puzzle out what I meant by aces. He slowly spoke. The potion gave me my movement, but I think the manticore would reach us before I can pull my bow again. Stall for time then. Keep asking him about this treasure. What is in it? Where is it? How long to reach it? Pretend we are interested. I'm interested. I instructed Maybe. It would take me about 2 hours to accumulate enough ether to open my dimensional space again. When I could do that, then I could kill the monstrosity. Yep, you cannot ask about the treasure for 2 hours and he will be like, yeah, this is fine. I will not do anything. As it stood now, the large adult manticore could rush and maybe kill both of us. Maybe it had recovered slightly with the lesser potion, but was still hindered. I will see what I can do. He began an extensive back and forth with the beast while Leonis got himself inside his cabin and closed the door. I doubted Leonis was going to be saving us. The young manticore was frothing blood now, and I guessed the lungs were filling with blood. With time, the blood should drown him. The manticore, seeing its offspring struggling, started to get impatient. I do not know what triggered it, but the manticore charged. Oops. Maybe it was ready and barely got an arrow off, but it was a leg strike, not a chest. I swung my own blade. I targeted the head, but misjudged the speed of the lunge. I hit the shoulder, and I was flung backward as it plowed into both of us. The manticore was focused on Maviet, but did not have the presence to whip its tail at me as I tumbled away. I was thinking, I was gonna say the exact same thing, Kate. It was watching its child die. I don't know what triggered him to charge at us. Like, really, Eric? Are you sure? You had no clue? I was fortunate only to take a single quill in my right shoulder. As I tumbled, the quill worked its way free, but not before tearing muscle and flesh and dosing me with its poison. It felt like a horse had kicked me, and the burning in my shoulder spread, making it difficult to move my right arm. I gained my feet and rushed to help Mavia. Maviet was trapped under the creature, which was raking him with its claws. Maviet was stabbing with a small skinning knife, causing the beast to bleed freely down onto him. Nice. Maviet grunted, and the manticore growled and roared in ferocious combat. The rage and fury of the beast did not allow it to see me coming again. I targeted the back of the neck with as powerful a swing as I could with my good arm. I cut the hide and connected solidly with spinal bone, but it was not strong enough to break the bone to reach the spinal cord. My second swing was met with a paw swipe that tore the blade from my hand and broke my wrist. The distraction of my attack gave Maviet room to jam one of his arrows under the jaw and up into the brain. The thick arrow did not snap as it disappeared into the head. Oh! Maviet twisted and grabbed a second to repeat the action. The manticore was alive, but could not focus as Maviet added a third arrow to the collection. He pulled himself away from the creature that was swooning on its feet. Its ugly face showed confusion. Maviet took his club, and with a two-handed overhead swing, brought it down on the beast's neck. A large crack told me the Goliath had shattered the spine and killed it. Oof. Both heaving for air, we watched as the creature slowly toppled. The ground thudded from its impact as it was easily over 1,000 pounds. Maybe it was heaving deep breaths and had multiple claw marks bleeding freely on his chest, with his leather armor shredded and hanging useless. When the manticore's chest stopped inflating, he looked over at me. Well, Eric, looks like we won. He fell to his knees. I went to him. My right arm was painful to use for the poison, and the other had a broken wrist. Help me inside. I need to lie down briefly, and we should check on Leonis. I assisted Mavieth, and he leaned on me a little heavily. He had to weigh more than 300 pounds. The door was barred shut, and it took Leonis a few minutes to open it. We won? He asked in disbelief. No, we bargained with it to take you as a reward. Mavieth crushed the beast's spine. It is dead. I will go make sure after we get Mavieth on the table to rest, I explained. Mavieth was laid out, and Leonis used red aloe on the wounds to prevent infection. It looked like he was going to live. I'm going to make sure they are all dead, I told the two, but Mavieth was already off in dreamland, and Leonis was having difficulty standing. What a fucking pack, dude. Oh. I reached the male manticore and watched it intently, making sure it was still. I didn't have to open my dimensional space to retrieve items completely. However, I had to wait 10 more minutes before I had enough ether to produce the essence collector. I placed it on the creature and had to wait another minute for some ether to activate it. The familiar blue wisps formed and congelated into a major glossy black sphere. I believed it to be the channeling attribute, if I recall correctly. It determined how fast ether was stored to an ether core. I eagerly did the female next, getting a second major glossy black essence. I approached the young manticore, but it was still breathing foamy red blood. I moved and sat on a log to watch it and wait for it to expire. Well, you didn't kill it! He doesn't even slice its throat or anything, or like stabs it a bit where he's like, I'll just wait for it to die. I was in no rush. Wow. I would have preferred to put it out of its misery, but my wrist was broken and my other shoulder burned in fierce pain. Oh, fine, I guess, but nah. I also wanted to conserve my ether, so there was no healing for the moment. I popped one of the large black pearls into my mouth. Wow. Stone cold. I just ate your mom in front of you while you lay dying. This is her soul, and this is your dad's. Nom nom nom. A chilly feeling extended from my stomach and kept going past my body, into my surroundings. I felt like I was momentarily experiencing an out-of-body experience, and then my senses snapped back. I realized I was feeling the ether in the environment, just briefly. I did not feel any different after the sensation passed, and I continued my death watch on the young manticore. The beast finally expired as the sun was setting. It had held on for hours, forcing itself to breathe. I walked over to the creature and stabbed it in the ribs with my sword. Why? Why didn't you do that before, Eric? Oh. It's dead. Now I can stab it. Like, what? Oh, there was no reaction as the blade slipped between the ribs. Oh my god. I set the collector and pushed ether into it. The blue wisps seemed thinner and uncertain as they collected in the center. A minor essence eventually formed, but it was not black. It was azure blue with white swirls. It was a magic affinity. I smiled as I moved both essences to my dimensional space for later consideration. With the last creature confirmed dead, I could start using my ether to heal. I focused on my shoulder first. The poison had damaged my muscles, and I needed to repair them first. I had recovered a fair amount of ether in waiting for the manticore to die. I closed the wound, the scab flaking off and showing new skin, and then repaired the muscles. I did as Larita told me and just focused on what needed healing. After I was done, I tested the arm and was happy with my efforts. Next was the wrist. It was swollen so much that my hand looked like a club. I I felt out the bone with my healing senses, and it took a lot more ether than I thought it would to set and meld the bone together. I tested and then reinforced the healing again, using all my ether. The swelling was already diminishing, but it was going to take time. I returned to the cabin to find both wardens sleeping, Mavius on the table and Leonis in his bed. I sat by the window to listen to the night insects and owls. I too soon fell asleep. What a fucking day. What a day. Chapter 89. Harvest. I had not meant to fall asleep, but after staying up all night and fighting the manticores, my exhaustion overtook me. My dreams were filled with talking manticores, flying all over the kingdom and spreading the word of my abilities to all who would listen in the coarse language of the stone giants. Soon, all the hounds in the empire were pursuing me to be dragged before the emperor. I woke when I fell off my chair and scrambled to my feet. The early dawn light was just showing, or maybe I had only slept a few minutes and it was evening. I still felt exhausted and stiff, so hours must have passed. Mavius and Leonis were still sleeping and still breathing. I removed a massive piece of hard salami from my space and started to cut chunks off to eat. I also filled my canteen with cold water. As I ate, I looked at my wrist. Most of the swelling was gone, and I worked to tighten the loose skin with some ether. Soon it looked like the wrist had never been broken. Mavius stirred and coughed. I stood to check on him. His chest looked a mess with over a dozen claw marks. Globs of red aloe were smeared on each one, but most had not closed yet. Your staring is making me uncomfortable, Eric. I am sure it is not as bad as it looks, Mavius said softly, but he tried moving and decided the table was more comfortable. I was staring at the table. I was amazed it could hold your weight, I joked. I have some salve to close your wounds. I handed him the vial. He reached up and took it gratefully. He sniffed the air and noticed the hard salami. It had been almost a 5-pound link, and I had eaten nearly a quarter of it. Fine, you can have that as well, Mavius. He grunted as he reached out, stretched his chest wounds, grabbed it off the bench next to the table, took a massive bite, and chewed. A bit salty. Do you have any more wine? He said with a grin. My storage space is limited. You will have to make do with water. Do you want help with the salve? I asked, stretching my stiffness away. I can manage, he said while chewing. Leonis is in worse shape than me. He is not going to be able to move for days. If you have any more, he gestured at the potion. No, I used up my healing potions already. I held up my wrist to indicate I was already healed. We should harvest the manticores this morning. I doubt any predators touch the carcasses, but it will not be long before they brave the clearing to do so, he said with a grunt as he got himself seated in a chair. Also, I should tell you what the creature told me before it attacked. I perked up. There really was a treasure. Maybe it laughed and immediately regretted it. Maybe. It said it had killed some other humans, and its lair was 25 miles northwest of here. I'm not sure if that is true or even the direction or distance. The beast's grasp of giant tongue was not impressive, but it did tell me more about the mages that summoned them here. Mavius paused and started treating the wounds on his chest, wiping the aloe off and applying a thin line of salve to close the wounds. He appeared to be doing the deepest cuts first as he worked. I waited and he started talking again. There were 5 manticores pulled through the summoning gate. The elf mage bound them to obey, and he ordered them to cause chaos. The other 2 went north, while these 3 came south. Elf mage? About a radiant? Who did they kill? I asked, and realized I was thinking more about the idea of treasure they might have hoarded than actually concerned about the manticore's rampage. It sounded like a merchant caravan, but there are no trade roads this far north. My guess is that the creature was lying, Mavius said, and he had somehow eaten the rest of the salami while tending to his wounds. He stood and inspected the healed skin on his chest. He then closed 2 punctures on the quills and hobbled over to Leonis. He used the remaining salve to close the other warden's wounds. The small vial was empty, and I was amazed at how far he had stretched it. It did not heal his shallow wounds, so they oozed a little as the scabs cracked when he stretched. Mavius gave me a hard pat on the back. You are a good friend to have, Eric. His pat left a stinging sensation on my shoulder. He started dressing. Come, and we can harvest the manticores together. We will let Leonis rest. Maybe it was not moving well as we exited the cabin to the fresh air. Leonis's cabin smelled terrible, and the fresh air reminded me of that fact. The manticores were all where I had left them last evening. Maybe it scanned the area before moving to the male specimen. He is large even for a male, he noted, while kneeling at the tail. Didn't Eric come across an abandoned merchant caravan on the road by the Ghost City? Yes, I was thinking of that one as well. I was like, if anything, it would be that one that they talked about. That's where we battled the Wraith, right? Mostly certain, yes. Because it was weird. And then the Wraith came. So yeah, something like that. There were still a half dozen of the 2-foot quill spikes, and new ones that were partially growing out the end. Maybe it tested the tail and sighed. The poison sac is drained. He lifted the tail and pointed to a rubbery sac below the spikes. When the beast releases its quills, the sac will spurt the poison on them. It is worth excellent coin to an alchemist, hunter, or assassin. You knew a lot of assassins, do you? I quipped, trying to be funny. Maybe it was focused and responded offhandedly. Just a few. I could not tell if he was joking. The quills make excellent arrowheads. Each mature quill can make maybe 4 arrowheads with the skilled fletcher. Maybe it was pulling the remaining quills out carefully and stacking them. I went and gathered the quills that had missed us in the fight. They were flat and stiff and looked more metallic than bone. Are these metal? I asked, dropping them in a pile. Yes, mostly. These creatures rely heavily on ether to survive. They need the flesh of beasts for sustenance and iron to replenish themselves. They have even been known to chew on metal when hungry. You just said iron. Well, it could be blood, I guess, but that's just but no. What? It also makes them their flesh inedible. Or we can obtain many other valuable things from the body. Maybe it replied, as he finished with the female's barbs. I thought you never hunted a manticore before. How do you know how to harvest one? I asked as he started to cut open the beast's stomach. Well, he said that he never had the chance to, but they did. Right? My father was a tanner in my village. I worked with him growing up. He taught me my skills. We were tasked a few times with harvesting manticores brought in by the hunters, but this is the largest I have ever seen. He had reached the testicles and carefully removed the scrotum. This will make a fine pouch once it is treated and worked. It is also a status symbol among my people to wear. To wear? I will prepare it and make you a nice coin purse out of it that you can wear with pride. Thanks. Thank you, I said, unsure how to feel about the offer. It is not a problem. I will make you a fine cloak from these wings. Usually, during the fighting, the beasts are grounded, and the wings are mostly destroyed in the process. Come and help, and I will show you, Eric. Maviath insisted. He called me a friend and has been using my name. It seems the battle and my actions have had a great impact on his perspective of me. Very good. I knelt as he explained what he would normally do for such a kill. Remove the organs to keep the meat safe from spoiling. This creature had no useful meat, so that step was not required. Removing the hide was not that difficult, with Maviath's strong hands tearing it away from the fascia. Maviath joyfully said he would make new pants from the male hide as he worked. The wings were next, and they felt like soft worked leather as I helped the Goliath remove the structural bones in the wing. It took us 3 hours to harvest the male and another 2 hours to harvest the female. The young one, Maviath decided, was not worth the effort. It had been a messy eater, and it smelled like rotting meat. At least the adults groomed themselves a little, but they also smelled foul. Like Leonis's cabin. When we finished, we were both covered in gore. Dried and congealed blood was everywhere. Maviath had smiled most of the time. The experience probably brought back fond memories of working with his father. Oh. We were resting and drinking water, and I asked, So why did you leave Stone Mountain Island? The Goliath winced at the question. He considered his answer and told me his tale. My father was a tanner in our village, and he was well respected. I never knew my mother, but I also had an older sister. Her name was Sorana. She was pretty, I was told, even by your ridiculous human standards. The island is a hostile place. He pointed at the manticore. Those creatures are just one of the dangers. I was out with Sorana and a friend of hers, Mira, whom I fancied. We were harvesting clams by the rocky shore. We were surprised by an orc raiding party. I was further back on the beach trailing them. He swallowed hard. My sister was killed, and Myra was taken. He paused, and I waited to hear what happened to him. I ran, he finally admitted. I was initially paralyzed with fear and did not think they spotted me, and I ran after Myra was netted, and Sorana took a head wound defending her. He looked at me with shame in his eyes. He sighed. I could not face my father for my cowardice. I walked to the nearest port city and took the first ship I could. I was young, a little bigger than you are now, but much stronger. Wow. I did not know what to say. Coward is not how I would describe Maviath. I asked. And you never talked to your father, to tell him you were okay? He might have thought you were taken like Myra. After some awkward silence, I added, maybe your sister lived from the head wound and was taken as well. I probably was not helping his conscience. I think about that every day. I replay the scene in my head, the desperation on her face, seeing her club matted aside and the orc blade connecting with her head as she stood over Myra, entangled in the net behind her. I doubted they wasted a healing potion on her. She would not have been worth the cost of it, maybe it said heavily. I was going to suggest maybe one of the orcs was a healer, but I did not think it would help the man, Eric. No, I never sent word to my father. I could not lie to him and embarrass him with the truth. Maybe it stood, breaking his melancholic memories. We should wash up, and these carcasses need to be dragged at least a half-mile from Laconis' cabin. Maybe it was in no shape to be dragging a 1,000-pound manticore into the woods, but he made a rope harness and proceeded to do just that. It was like his story reminded him of his penance and reason for exiling himself. Aw, Maviath. Aw. I checked on Leonis, who was still sleeping, and then pulled the smallest manticore into the woods, with Maviath pulling the female on his second trip. The rope bit into me, but my 400-pound beast was half the size of the mother. Even then, Maviath easily outpaced me with his long strides. His lesser wounds opened, and he strained in the effort, but I was fairly certain that he would have declined even if I offered him a potion. He walked away, not looking back after untying his ropes. I took a moment to clean and dropped the manticore innards and a human heart from the Barbaradian soldier out of my space. I still had the dead elf in my storage and planned to dispose of him soon. I followed Maviath to a small lake near the cabin. We waited on the shore for a few moments, studying the environment for danger before entering the water to bathe. We cleaned ourselves and our clothes as best as possible before air drying until the sun started to set. We talked about skinning animals and the process of curing and drying hides for various purposes. I was glad to take Maviath's mind off his sister by asking questions. Maviath indicated we should head back to the cabin. Tomorrow morning you should return to the city. I will stay with Leonis. It should take no longer than a week before he can take care of himself. Tell the Duchess I will return then. If I head straight south, I will find Sobral, I asked, trying to picture the map. Maviath responded in his deep voice. No, we moved further west, but you will encounter the road and river. Just take the road north along the river, and you will reach the city. That night, I took an oblivion pill to get a good night's rest. Maviath was still limping in the morning, and Leonis was finally awake and eating. I headed out alone after sharing a meal with them. Damn. Maviath is a sad bro. Oh, Maviath is cute. Oh, he's nice. Oh, poor him. He was a shot, but he wasn't. Because he said, but then he doesn't know how old Eric is. He used to see Eric as small. I don't know. He was young. Okay, we're jumping in. This is the longest longest chapter name we've had so far, I think. And it is an interesting one. Okay, so on the magic system, can you only pick one of the spells? He got a book, and then it was like a few of them. He can only pick one of those, yes. And he should pick one that, since he is better than the book is, basically, so he could have taken one that is even better, but he doesn't have the knowledge of that one, so he's gonna take one that's still very good, but not, he could have done better. But he can choose one, yes. One time. So let's just read the chapter name here. Chapter 90. Choosing a time affinity spell form. Yes, he can only choose one time affinity spell. That's how I understand it, at least. So the way it works is, since he can't cast true magic, he can only pick one spell form. Yeah, exactly. One spell form per affinity, I think. I don't know if he can actually do all of them, or if that would be too much, or if there's like a limit, like, oh, like, yeah. Basically, he can't use normal magic, so he has to imprint only one spell as a passive spell. Yes. All of this makes sense when explained nicely like that. I proceeded through the woods, using the sun and the blue moss to guide my direction of travel. Constantine had told me that the blue moss only grows on the north side of rocks and trees because it needs the light of the blue moon, Poseidon's tear, to grow. I didn't understand how the moon could only appear in the north sky at night, but I took him at his word, as it seemed to work as a navigation tool. Mid-morning, I took a few moments to bury the Bardarabian elf woodsman. Finally! I removed a section of earth, placed him in the grave, and then added the earth back on top of him. I was not sure of his customs, but I hoped my efforts would at least end one of my disturbing dreams. I don't think that this is his custom, but still. Good enough. I tried to practice my skill at moving silently in the woods, but the effort and the slower pace made it frustrating, so I focused sporadically. With my armor left in Maviet's stone abode, I tried to head in its direction. It was not like anything looked familiar as I walked. I did pause to harvest mushrooms. They were quick and easy and did not slow me down much. I ate one of the ration bars for energy and used the leaf wrapping afterwards as toilet paper. It was late afternoon when I thought I was close to Maviet's home based on the distance I had traveled. I found some areas where blood grass had been harvested. It might not have been me who gathered this particular grass, but it tickled my memory. Every tree looked the same, but it felt like I was close. I soon found a heavily trodden path made by a large man. It did not take me long to follow it to Maviet's small hidden home. I was quite proud of myself for finding it. Lifting the bar on his door took some effort, but I managed. I entered his home, looking forward to a night's rest in the silky weasel pelts. I could reach the city in a few hours in the morning. My armor was still in the spare room. Next time, I would store it and not leave it behind. It might have prevented my shoulder from being injured by the manticore's quill. I also thought of that, like, he should have just stored it, but then I thought maybe he doesn't want to expose to Mavius that he has a bigger storage space, but I'm like, I think he should prioritize his life over that fact. But anyway, so I was like, I will give him that reason, but I still think he should have taken it with him. I ate from Maviet's stores. I used the bacon fat to fry onions, potatoes, and salted meat. I was sure he wouldn't mind. I ate well and cleaned up after. It was night outside, and I went into the guest room after ensuring the front door was secure. I lay in bed and opened the Time Affinity book for spell forms. I finally had time to review my options, so I could work on a new spell form. Time Affinity Lesser Spell Forms. Hasted Mind, Seize Momentum, Echo in Time, Compress Sleep. Time Affinity Major Spell Forms. Hasten Self, Slow Aging, Age Target, Probable Future. Time Apex Major Spell Forms. Slow Domain, Flashback, Ageless, Stasis. So he should probably take one of the major spell forms, I assume. if he likes them. The apex major spell forms, I mean. I read the description of the lesser spell forms first. The most commonly selected spell form was compressed sleep. This allowed you to rest while using your ether to recover your mental state. It did not affect your body, only your mind. Each ether invested gave you about 4 hours of rest in a single hour, so you can get complete rest and mental recovery in just 2 hours. It also doubled your ether recovery while you slept, getting 4 hours of ether recovery for 2 hours of sleep. Okay, well that does fit with the amulets. Hastened Mind was very interesting as it allowed me to think faster. Ooh. It did not make me smarter. Time just passed much faster in my head. At the lowest affinity of 10, you would get to think about 5 times faster. Oh my, imagine that. That's in 5 times. Wow. The text noted that every 10 points in affinity, that time doubled. So with my 90 affinity, I could get 10 minutes for every second in real time. Oh my god! The problem was it only affected my thinking and not my body. It would make reading books a breeze, right? It was like, poof, done. Holy shit. Wow. Seize momentum was even more intriguing. This required you to touch an object and steal all its inertia. So if you timed it right, you could stop a sword before it cut you. Ooh. Then again, you could lose some fingers if you were even half a breath too late. Okay, it doesn't sound so nice. The amount of ether depended on the size of the object affected. The only interesting thing about this spell was that the object would be frozen momentarily based on a person's affinity. The only reference I had was someone with an affinity of 30 in time could hold an object just over a heartbeat after stealing its momentum. Did that mean the object would remain in place for a minute with my 90 affinity? The final lesser spell form was Echo in Time. This spell form allowed the caster to focus on an area and replay what happened in the past. How far back they could view depended on the person's affinity. At a 25 affinity, they could look back as far as a month. They had an entire reference book for using this specific spell form. It was also a common spell clairvoyance casters learned. A common spell clairvoyance casters learned. The time version was slightly more powerful, being able to look further into the past. If the affinity scaling power held, then my 90 affinity could look back almost 8 years. 8 years! Wow. But this one isn't too... I mean, he won't take this one. The middle tier listed in the book started with Hastened Self. Unlike Hastened Mind, Hastened Self affected your entire body. At a 30 affinity, you moved 50% faster. At 40 affinity, it became twice as fast. According to research, you could go more quickly, but the world still worked on the body normally. It noted an example of a mage with a 50 affinity in time who went blind every time he used Hastened Self. So it was a useful spell, especially in combat, but it had a ceiling. I kept thinking back to a bug being splattered on a windshield. Oh, yeah. We were definitely getting to some good spell forms. Slow aging sounded promising. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood the description. Okay, here we go. There was a similar spell, but you would need to keep it active all the time to get its benefits. The spell form was much more effective as it required either your ether core to be full or feeding it a trickle of your recovering ether from channeling. Your aging slowed to 1/10 of its normal rate at a 40 affinity in time. If it scaled up like other spell forms, then my aging would be 1 of 320th normal. How do you say this? How do I say this? I understand, but I don't know how to say this. You get it. Like, okay. Yeah, it's not like I can't say 1/3, like 1/320th normal. Anyway, getting 300 years for every 1 year was appealing. I could live to be 20,000 or even older. Of course, the spell form required ether all the time, but there were exercises to train yourself to direct ether constantly to a spell form, even while sleeping. Thank you for saying I got it right. So only when my ether bottomed out would it stop. I laughed aloud, as that was a common occurrence for me. The next spell form was Age Target, and it did not work well on living things. I knew that was due to an object's ether resistance, but I should be able to overcome those defenses with a 90 affinity, as I did with my space affinity. I did the conversion, and each ether I invested would age a target by about 8 years. I did not see how that would help me in combat or life. Maybe growing plants, but there were probably better spells than that nature affinity for that. It had to have applications if the spell was in this book. Yeah, of course. I read a little further and found it was used mostly in alchemy. And brewing, probably. Potions that required brewing, well, I meant like beer, for days, could be made in minutes. I do not think I was destined to be an alchemist. Probable Future was also completely combat focused. The spell form gave the mage a quick view of the next 20 seconds. In a large-scale battle, they would know troop movements before they occurred and know if a defense failed. It was all experience from the mage's view and left them with a sizable headache afterward. Nice. Using it multiple times in succession could make the mage go unconscious. It was an incredible power, but it did not fit me. The higher spell forms had to be incredible. The first did not disappoint. Slow Domain. It created a bubble of slowed time around the caster. Anything entering the bubble will slow down, giving the caster time to react. The size of the bubble was fixed at 10 feet. How slowly the people and items in the bubble moved was related to the caster's affinity and time. At 60, that was 80% of their normal speed. Wow, so they're basically fucking slow. With my 90 affinity, it would be 40% of their normal speed. And the best part was there was no ether resistance to overcome. The bubble was fixed. Damn. The constant ether was a problem, and each second required a relative ether point. The bubble was also fixed in space once activated. If the caster left the bubble, it would end. Still, I could imagine being a terror on the battlefield with this, or fighting monsters with ease. Flashback was even more powerful. It sent the caster back in time with the knowledge of the future. It was related to how much ether was invested in the spell form when activated. What? It sent the caster back in time with the knowledge of the future. Okay. So it's like seeing the future, but you live the future, and then you go back and do it differently. And then you know what's going to happen, I guess. It was related to how much ether was invested in the spell form when activated. With my available ether, I could go back about 10 seconds if my core was full. In battle, this was immense, especially if I was avoiding a killing blow, but you would still need to realize you were about to die to activate it. Like Echo, I was gonna say, just like Echo from League of Legends. The next spell form was called Ageless. It worked similarly to slow aging, except when you channeled ether, you did not age at all. It did have some drawbacks. It kept your body in the same state. That meant you could not alter your physical attributes through anything but essences. You could always stop ether channeling to the spell form to age. The second drawback was it took more ether to maintain than slow aging, almost 5 times as much. This meant I would recover my ether slower when it was active. Slow aging only used a trickle of ether. Stasis, listed last in the text, was an interesting spell form. It created a bubble of still time around an object or the caster. Time halted in the bubble based on how much ether was invested. The bubble size was also limited by the amount of ether invested. The stasis could be broken if the object was moved. I was not interested in becoming Sleeping Beauty, so I did not bother puzzling out the math based on my affinity and available ether. I do not know if these were all the spell forms available to the time affinity, but they were the most popular in the Empire. My 90 affinity might have more powerful versions of these, but I did not have time to wait. I needed to start working on something now. I reduced my choices to Slow Domain or Slow Aging. Ageless was better than Slow Aging, but with my high affinity, they were about the same. And if I increased my time affinity with Essence, I could slow my aging even further. Slow Domain was incredible too. It could be a lifesaver against a powerful foe or against multiple opponents. Then again, I had my dimensional space for one-on-one combat. I was very tempted to live forever. I would as well. But could I watch friends and family age and die around me? Also, just because I aged extremely slowly did not mean I could not die. It seemed like almost every week I was almost getting myself killed. Slow Domain could be learned as a normal spell. Of course, I could not cast it yet, but I had been hardened to get my first essences to improve my magic attributes. With enough time, I could get my magic attributes high enough to cast spells effectively. I needed the time. Slow aging was my choice. Hell yeah! Yes! I had spent hours reading and examining the book and only got a few hours of sleep. I would have to ask Mavieth if I could have these giant weasel pelts. They were too comfortable a bed. I put on my armor and exited Mavieth's home. It should only be a few hours to the city, and I would see if they missed me. Loreen has missed you. Imagine Loreen has found someone else. Immediately. I don't like you anymore, Eric. You left me. It missed his shot. I can see it happen. I can definitely see it happen. Oh, but we will see if it will happen next time.